1864, the Confederacy is dying, but the U.S. election could still save it. Lincoln must be denied a second term. The Union war effort must be broken, and all the South needs to do is hold on for just a few more months. That's coming up. This is a civil war in America. Episode 239 after Chattanooga. Richmond is cut off from the west. The armies are ragged and supplies are scarce, but the folks back home tell the soldiers not to worry. They'll be eating oysters and shrimp again come November. All they have to do is hold out just a little while longer. The Confederacy's desperate hope is that if they can just survive a little longer, they can force Lincoln out of office. No more elections, no more war. So, the plan is clear. Hold out until November 8th. Deny Lincoln a win, force a negotiated peace, and end this horrible war. Except Sherman doesn't intend to leave the war in the hands of voters. He intends to break the South's war heartland, destroy its armies, and force a political resolution that will ensure the perpetuity of the Union. And so, in the spring of 1864, General Grant makes a command shuffle. He heads east with his main command to take over the siege of Richmond, and he gives Sherman the western armies with orders to get to Atlanta. Winter 1864 finds Sherman on the march through Mississippi in what will become known as Sherman's Meridian Raid. Rails, depots, and arsenals are wrecked along the way. The war's turning point, Sherman decides, isn't going to be some great battle, but rather the progressive destruction of the South's ability to wage war. It's a lesson he'll carry forward. Grant's strategy for 1864 is simple. Hit everywhere at once. Lee's army will be pinned in Virginia, while Atlanta will be the new objective in the West. The idea is to stretch the rebels thin. If Atlanta falls, it'll be hard for the eastern armies to hold out. If Lee can break out of his siege, it'll be hard for him to reinforce the West. Sherman knows the Confederates will want to stop him from taking Atlanta, but he's not planning to fight them in front of their prepared works like his predecessors did. Instead, he'll outflank and unhinge their positions by maneuver, making them untenable. But first, Sherman has to solve an engineering problem. The Western and Atlantic RR is a lifeline to Sherman's supply base. He'll need to protect it. So he sends a strong force to hold the railroad bridges at strategic points, then pushes forward with the rest. His opponent is Lieutenant General Joseph E. Johnston, who has just been given command of the Army of Tennessee. Johnston has managed to pull together something resembling an army from the remnants of various commands. He knows he's outnumbered and outgunned, so his strategy will be to choose defense and delay, hoping time will work in the Confederacy's favor. Johnston's goal is to deny Sherman a headline victory before Election Day. Lincoln will still be campaigning for re-election in November. And if Johnston can just keep the Union Army from taking Atlanta, the politicians in Richmond might be able to force a negotiated peace. May 1864, the Atlanta campaign opens. Skirmishers and cav skirmishers screen both armies' main forces. Cav charges and artillery duels shake the air. Sherman presses forward, probing for gaps in Johnston's lines. Johnston, in turn, looks for ways to stop Sherman's advance without a general engagement. At Rocky Face or Resaca, Sherman's troops find a gap in the Confederate lines, but it proves to be a feint. Johnston has placed his main force to the right of the gap, with only light troops guarding the pass. As Sherman's troops enter the defile, Johnston's main force lies in wait. Once again, Sherman runs into prepared works. As the fighting continues, we'll see how Sherman deals with this problem. Let's move to the second part of that story. What's the best way to take one of the largest cities in the Confederacy? Today we re-looking at maps and trying not to get lost in the weeds as we look at how Sherman marched on Atlanta, Part 2, or Grant's 1864 strategy. Last episode, we looked at the Overland Campaign and the Siege of Petersburg. Now it's time to see what's going on over here. After the fighting at Resaca, May 14th to 15th, Johnston fell back overnight to Adairsville, Georgia, fearing he would be cut off from the rest of his army. He did pull off a nifty ambush at Adairsville, but then there was confusion when a brigade reported the capture of an entire division, which caused some panicking and led to General George Thomas nearly riding off to certain death until he got word from headquarters that he was actually still alive. And so the trap was spoiled and Johnston was able to withdraw. He set up a strong defensive line at Allatoona Pass, too strong to storm, and the Union spent considerable time and ammo trying to take it anyway. So Johnston fell back. While the fighting here was some of the most intense of the entire war, the real story is how much ground was covered by both sides. Neither army wanted to really risk a major battle, so they fell back to entrench, and then fell forward again as soon as the other guy did. It wasn't until May that Johnston fell back to Dallas New Hope Church. Here the weather was rainy and the men were in the woods and the entrenchments. There was a lot of close fighting and bloody repulses on both sides. But finally, on May, Johnston was forced to fall back again to Pickett's Mill. Here, the Union began a piecemeal assault, which was mauled by General Claiborne and his rebel brigade. The fighting continued all the way through the 28th, but no one wanted to break the stalemate, so the armies went back to entrenching. Johnston began to slide left to try to get around Sherman, and this caused Sherman to slide right, and then Johnston to slide back toward Marietta. And now the armies are in pretty much the same position they were in when they started in May. It's June. It's been a month of fencing. But the constant skirmishes are draining both armies. The casualties have been high and neither side has gained anything. Then came the Battle of Pine Mountain, June 14th, where a massive artillery salvo from the Union killed Confederate Gen. Leonidas Polk. Then 3 days later, Hood attacked at Kolb's Farm, but his unauthorized attack failed due to the strong works of the Union left wing under General Schofield. So Johnston decided to try a rare frontal blow at Kennesaw Mountain on the 27th. But once again, Sherman had received intelligence that the Confederates were preparing to evacuate Atlanta. So, while the Union assaulted, Sherman sent General Schofield to find a crossing on the Chattahoochee River. And sure enough, he found one, and the Confederates didn't bother to defend it. So Sherman let his troops catch their breath, and Johnston yielded his army to the Chattahoochee line. In early July, the crossings were secured, and Johnston began to prepare to ambush the Union at Peachtree Creek. But he was relieved of duty before he could carry out his plan. President Davis replaced him with General John Bell Hood, who was very aggressive and prone to taking risks. And even though Sherman knew Hood was a risk-taker, he was still surprised by how recklessly he attacked. On July 20th, Hood attacked late in the day. His troops were exhausted, and the Federals were dug into a strong defensive line along Peachtree Creek. The Union held its fire until the last moment, then unleashed a deadly volley that tore into the Confederate ranks. The Confederates kept coming, but their losses were mounting and the assault failed. With the ammunition nearly expended, Hood ordered a retreat, but soon after, he fell ill. On July 22nd, Sherman detached General Thomas with 4 of his 5 corps to the vicinity of Atlanta to keep Hood occupied, while the rest of his army would go south to cut the Macon and Western Railroad. That evening, Hood tried to flank the Union left under General Howard, but was repelled with heavy losses. In the course of the battle, American Gen McPherson was killed. Both sides claimed victory and the lines held. But the next day, July 23rd, fighting broke out again at Ezra Church. Howard was entrenched on the left and the center of the Union line, and Hood launched a series of increasingly desperate assaults. He threw everything he had at Howard, but his troops were shredded to pieces as they reached the crest of the hill in front of the Union lines. And at the end of the day, the railroad was still intact. Once again, the armies fell back into a siege situation. The Federals pounded the Confederates round the clock with their artillery, while the cavalrymen on both sides made hit-and-run raids on the rails. Both sides were bloodied, but neither could gain any advantage. So Sherman changed his approach. He detached General Thomas from Atlanta and moved him east to try to cut the Macon and western south of the city. He kept 4 of his 5 corps around Atlanta to deal with Hood. Thomas struck the Confederates hard at Jonesboro, August 31st, September 1st. General Hardee's assaults on the Union right were bloodily repelled, and the Federals took Jonesboro itself. More importantly, the rails were wrecked. Atlanta was officially isolated. During the night, Union cavalrymen burned all the depots, and the ammunition in Atlanta exploded, spreading flames all over the city. And then, on September 2nd, 1864, General Thomas telegraphed back to headquarters, "Atlanta is ours, and fairly won. If you will come out on the Atlanta road, you will see the whole rebel army gone." They evacuated during the night. Thus ended the Atlanta campaign. Northern morale surged. Lincoln's path to re-election was clear. Meanwhile, Davis rode into Atlanta to meet with Hood and see for himself how badly things were going. Hood outlined his grand plan to raid north to Lovejoy's Station, capture Sherman's supply trains, and then crush his army. But as soon as Davis left, Hood cabled Richmond for reinforcements. The surprise was spoiled, and Sherman was none too pleased when he read about Hood's plans in the papers. He detached General Thomas from Atlanta and sent him to Nashville to organize the defenses of that city. He kept his 4 corps around Atlanta for his next move. And that move was his march to the sea. Next time we'll look at how he cut loose from his supply lines and sent to columns that swept down to Savannah.